Hi everyone, in this video we're going to use the distributive property to simplify and factor expressions with rational numbers. So now we're going to be using positive and negative fractions, decimals, mixed numbers. So just like before, we can use the distributive property to push a common factor into each terms in parentheses, or we can pull out a common factor from each term. So simplify each expression using the distributive property. 2/3 times the quantity, negative 1/4 x minus 15. So I'm going to multiply each term in the parentheses by 2/3. So it becomes 2/3 times negative 1/4 x minus 2/3 times 15. Now we're going to multiply it out. 2/3 times negative 1/4, I can cross cancel, so it becomes negative 1/6 x minus 2/3 times 15 becomes 10. So my expression becomes negative 1/6 x minus 10. 3/500 times the quantity, 2r minus 3 8/10 plus 1 1/2. So in this case, I am going to convert that 1 1/2 into a decimal, 1 5/10. Then everything's in the same format as a decimal, and I can multiply it through. So it becomes 3/500 times 2r minus 3/500 times 3 8/10 z plus 3/500 times 1 5/10. Okay, now I'm going to multiply each term out. 3/500 times 2r becomes 7/10 r. I'm going to use my calculator to help me. 3/500 times 3 8/10. So I get minus 1 33/100 z plus 3/500 times 1 5/10 is 5 25,000. And that's my simplified expression. Factor each expression completely. Negative 3/8 j plus 1 5/10. So I'm going to convert 1 5/10 now into an improper fraction. So 1 5/10 is equivalent to 1 1/2. As an improper fraction, that is 3/2. So my original expression is negative 3/8 j plus 3/2. And now I'm looking for the greatest common factor of the numbers, the coefficients. So I'm looking for the greatest common factor of 3/8 and 3/2. So I can break it apart into the numerator and the denominator. The greatest common factor of 3 and 3 would be 3. And in the denominator, the greatest common factor of 8 and 2 is 2. So my greatest common factor in each term is going to be 3/2. So I'm going to rewrite each term showing that 3/2 as a factor. So negative 3/8 j, I'm going to rewrite as 3/8 times negative 1/4 j plus 3/2, I'm going to rewrite as 3/2 times 1. Now I can pull that common factor of 3/2 out to the front. So it becomes 3/2 times the quantity, negative 1/4 j plus 1. Okay, our next example. Negative 2 1/3 x squared minus 1 1/2 t. So just like before, we're going to change each of these mixed numbers into an improper fraction. So negative 2 1/3 becomes negative 7/3 x squared minus 1 and 1/2 t becomes 3/2 t. Look at the number parts. So I'm looking at 7/3 and 3/2. And I'm looking for the greatest common factor. So looking at 7 and 3, the greatest common factor there is 1. Looking at 3 and 2 in the denominators, the greatest common factor there is also 1. So the greatest common factor for these two fractions is 1/1, or just 1. So this expression cannot be factored because the greatest common factor is a 1. Now, if I wanted to, I could factor out a -1. So I could rewrite it as -1 times 7/3 x squared minus 1 times 3/2 t. And then my factored form would be -1 times the quantity, 7/3 x squared plus 3/2 t. I hope this video helps. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.